If I was to venture a guess of what was in your mug, my first guess would be water, my second guess would be tea, and my third guess would be coffee. Even though we technically only need water to survive, tea and coffee have become these beloved beverages that we are very passionate about. But I'm not actually interested in knowing what's your preference between tea versus coffee. What I'm interested in is what's underneath that decision. When I dug into the history of the choice between coffee versus tea, the significance of that decision was so much more interesting. And in fact, knowing that allows us to get more out of our morning beverage, whether it's tea, coffee, or honestly anything else.
Most of us start our day either with a hot cup of tea or a mug of freshly brewed coffee. So is it only natural that we would compare them? After all, they function in very similar roles in our lives, being that morning pick-me-up, the afternoon boost, or the drink in which we're enjoying while catching up with friends or coworkers. As well, they offer similar perks with the caffeine and antioxidants. But in the same breath, we aren't hotly debating bagels versus English muffins.
Unless you're on Reddit.
We're happy enough to just leave it as a personal preference, your own taste. So what is about tea and coffee that makes their rivalry so hotly debated? I don't think it's about taste. I don't think it's about preference. I actually think it's about what they represent. Let's first unpack the history of tea so we can understand what it's come to symbolize. The first thing you need to know is all tea comes from this one plant, Camellia sinensis. Legend tells us that tea was first discovered in 2737 BC, approximately, in China by Emperor Shennong, who is now deified as the creator of agriculture and traditional medicine. Initially, tea was boiled to create medicine, or it was incorporated into food for the health benefits. The first published account we have of the planting and cultivation, processing, and consumption of tea comes from 350. But it was really during the Tang Dynasty where the drinking of tea became widespread and popular. Tea houses popped up along busy trade routes, offering a place of rest and refreshment for those traveling along them. There they could enjoy tea along with some food dishes, which that is actually the beginning of dim sum as we know it today. Tea houses evolved into not just being these social hubs that brought many different people together, they also evolved into a place where the art of tea could be enjoyed through tea ceremonies. Over time, there were tea houses that started growing more elegant and sophisticated. These became places of intellectual exchange, artistic storytelling, and the cultivation of palate. The Silk Road did mean that tea had made its way into Europe, but it really wasn't until oceanic trade routes between Europe and China were established that the trade of tea became steady. In 1610, the Dutch East India Company delivered its first shipment of tea to Europe. By the 1650s, tea had made its way into the countries of Europe and was being served as a drink for the wealthy and notable. Fast forward to the 1700s, more and more tea is being imported, and that makes it more accessible and therefore more popular with everyday people and not just the wealthy. As tea grew in popularity, tea rooms sprang up across Europe and colonial North America, offering places for people to come and enjoy this beverage. And what's special about tea rooms is they offered something that coffee houses and taverns did not. First, they offered a space where women were welcome, and not only were they welcome, but they could be there without male chaperones. Second, these tea rooms served as meeting places for women to rally together in seeking change, whether that was the temperance movement or the civil rights movement. Third, these tea rooms were considered acceptable business ventures, which meant women were able to run them and support themselves and maybe even their families with them. So with all that in mind, here's what tea has come to symbolize today. Tea is a symbol of vitality with all the health benefits that can come from drinking tea. Tea is also a symbol of sophistication with its long history of being enjoyed by the wealthy and notable across countries and throughout the centuries. Tea is also a symbol of calm with all the ceremonies and traditions that have evolved around the world focused on enjoying tea and usually enjoying tea in the company of others.
Yeah.
Now let's look at the history of coffee to see what it has come to symbolize. Coffee beans come from the seeds, which are the berries of these trees. Now, technically there are a bunch of different coffee plants, but the most well-known and popular variety is coffee Arabica. One popular legend tells us that coffee was first discovered in 850 in the highlands of Ethiopia by this guy, a goat herder named Kaldi. He noticed his goats became unusually energetic after eating berries off of this one tree. So then he tried it himself and noticed the energizing effect it had. As the coffee tea plant and the knowledge of its effects spread, people utilized this plant in many different ways. They made tea from the leaves, they made wine from the berries, they would mix the berries with ghee to create this sustaining snack. As far as coffee as we know it today goes, it seems the earliest record we have of coffee being roasted, ground, and brewed comes in the 1450s in the Sufi monasteries of Yemen, where this drink was used to help devotees stay awake during long rituals and prayers. Constantinople, which is now modern-day Istanbul, is the first place we can find record of a coffee house being opened, and it opened in around the 1470s. These coffee houses became popular places for men to gather in order to converse, to smoke, and to enjoy a variety of other forms of entertainment. Coffee's widespread popularity was not without pushback from religious and government leaders through different periods in time. Coffee often facilitated political discussions which could seed discontent. Now, coffee slowly made its way into Europe via Turkish traders and notably Venetian merchants, who were the first ones in Europe to largely import coffee. We started to see coffee houses springing up in the major cities of Europe in the second half of the 1600s. At this time, coffee houses also made their way across the Atlantic Ocean to colonial North America. Part of the success of coffee houses can be attributed to the lack of potable water. Instead of needing to go to the tavern to get a pint as your form of hydration, now there was the sober alternative of going to a coffee house where the water had been boiled in order to make the drink. This sort of atmosphere lent itself well to a place where men could come to exchange information, engage in intellectual conversations, and make business deals. Towards the end of the 1700s, not only was coffee in hand, but revolution was in the air. One of the iconic moments of the American Revolution took place in 1773 and is known as the Boston Tea Party, where patriots threw over 300 chests of tea belonging to the British East India Company into the Boston Harbor. In this moment, tea was rejected as a symbol of Britain's rule and therefore meant that the patriotic beverage of choice would be coffee. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Enlightenment thinkers were gathering in French coffee houses. Men across different social classes came to hear and exchange revolutionary ideas, eventually turned those ideas into action. With all that in mind, today coffee has become a symbol of grind and hard work, with its high caffeine content allowing people to push through exhaustion to keep on working. Coffee is a symbol of disruption, given its long history of being the drink of choice by those who are discussing and pursuing radical ideas.
Coffee has also become a symbol for hustle and busyness, as coffee shops are these iconic locations in any fast-paced cities, crammed full of people typing furiously on their laptop, or with people rushing in and out, quickly grabbing a coffee before heading off to their next thing.
Do you see how this debate isn't actually about which drink is better for you or tastes more delicious? It's about how you approach life. On a symbolic level, drinking tea represents an approach to life where you're slowing down to enjoy each step of the journey. In contrast, drinking coffee represents an approach to life where you're wrestling in the frenzy of it all, trying to get ahead. And if you're still not convinced about this, you don't need to look any further than decaf coffee. Truly, this article by Rebecca Jennings says it all, but let me give you my notes on it. First, she makes a really good point that if you look at coffee, it actually makes for an ideal candidate for a pseudoscientific pushback. Most people drink coffee, and most do so on a daily basis. There are several well-documented negative side effects of coffee, such as sleep disruption, elevated anxiety, nausea, and energy crashes. As well, we know that caffeine can be addictive. So why hasn't it happened? Why aren't we rallying together in a boycott against big caffeine? It's because it's not really about the health benefits or drawbacks of caffeinated coffee. Jennings says it like this: the hashtag death before decaf, however, is not really about a love of coffee. An Instagram quote, "Worshipping coffee demonstrates something more performative, that the poster is rising and grinding. They're hustling. They're putting their hair in a messy bun and handling it." A coffee quote on Instagram is generally kind of a flex, one that implies that people are counting on you to be quick, sharp, and ready for anything. In part, this might be why decaf is so maligned. It has all the bitterness and blandness of coffee, and crucially, none of the implications that the drinker is here to hustle. If decaf is for old folks at diners, then caffeinated beverages are for the young, for the virile, and productive. Now, some may argue the inferiority of decaf coffee on the basis of taste. And while that may have been true a couple decades ago, there's been plenty of innovation since. For example, instead of using harsh chemicals to draw out the caffeine from coffee beans, we now have a process called Swiss water, which, as you can tell by the name, uses water. Now, this extra step does mean that decaf coffee beans cost more, but not significantly. When you look at how much people are willing to pay for their Starbucks drink, I don't really think you can make a compelling argument that the lack of popularity of decaf comes from the cost of it.
In the end, people are addicted to their caffeinated coffee and proud of it.
So now what?
How can this history lesson and this reflection of culture help you enjoy your morning beverage more? Well, I think overall this just brings a greater awareness, and I think that allows us to make a more mindful and therefore satisfactory choice. So here are the 4 tips that I think we can all take away from this. I think the first thing to be said might be an obvious one, but it's to choose and drink whichever you enjoy the most, whether it be coffee or tea. And if you do like coffee, but the caffeine messes with you, then drink decaf. I get that the pot of coffee that someone else put on is usually pretty convenient. And I'm not saying that we should never touch that out of principle or anything. Just saying that maybe when you do have the choice, consider picking the drink that you actually enjoy the most. The second tip I have for us is to enjoy the fact that you get to pick whatever tea leaves or coffee beans that you're making your drink out of. Third way coffee shops, I think, have really helped expand coffee to be something that is not just a means to an end, but something to be savored. And a lot of them have really cool stories about how they source and process their beans. And the same thing with tea. There are so many different varieties. So maybe consider taking yourself on a little tasting tour and trying different coffee beans, trying different teas. Third, take the time to perfect your brewing method. I'm not saying that you have to go down the very deep rabbit hole, but you can just do a quick Google search and get a few tips on how to get the most out of your tea or coffee and really bring out the magnificent flavors that are in it. Ultimately, I think why tea and coffee are so dear to us is because we usually have some sort of ritual that we have around preparing it, whether it's in the morning or at night. That practice of just going to the kitchen, getting your mug out, preparing it, I think that is part of the enjoyment. Or maybe the familiar is going to a cafe and getting your regular order. Lastly, make sure you're actually taking a moment to appreciate what you're sipping on, to slow down and actually enjoy the moment. I live in reality too. I know sometimes you're just grabbing the drink and running out the door and you're on to your next thing. Even if you can just take one deep breath and take a moment to focus on all the delicious flavors that you're getting, I think that can easily elevate and help us appreciate that much more. The choice that you're really making isn't between tea or coffee. It's about if you're gonna slow down and enjoy whatever you're drinking and whatever context that it's happening in. And I think that's a great reminder and invitation. As busy as life can be, those moments of getting to pause and appreciate make it that much more vibrant. It can be more than a means to an end. It can be an opportunity for you to actually savor life rather than rushing through it. And I think we could all do with a little more of that. This has been a really cool experience, not just going on the deep dive and learning all this, but actually getting to share it with you and articulate my ideas and bring them all together in a video. So thank you for going on this deep dive with me. My hope with my channel is to make videos that will help us all savor the good in the world a little bit more. And I think that's gonna be kind of hodgepodge, a little bit patchwork, but I also think that's gonna be the fun of it all. If you would like to join me with this journey, keep hanging out, then why don't you hit that subscribe? I'm not playing around. I'm serious about making another video. So I'm saying it now. I'll see you in the next one.